10 days ago. They were incredibly supportive, incredibly thorough. And this contrasted, I have to say, with the national team who put the phone down on me when after one ring, they expected me to pick it up. I did, but they put the phone down on me. But I wondered if the Health Secretary was aware that the national test and trace team are expecting the local public health departments to pick up during the Christmas holidays as the national test and trace team go on holiday. But the public health team are going to have to pick up the slack when they're not doing their job.
Mr. Speaker, first the Honourable Lady, like so many in this House, is absolutely right to point out the phenomenal work that the NHS has been doing, particularly on the vaccination programme and also NHS test and trace on the work that they do, and also a UK HSA on the testing programme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In West Dorset, we were very fortunate to lead the way with the vaccinations in the first and second tiers, and I should say that was mainly thanks to our many GPs across the county who work tirelessly. But of course, our GPs don't just have to do vaccinations, they have to do many other things as well. And currently, Mr. Speaker, we are struggling, my constituents are struggling, particularly my older constituents, to get the booster jab. Could I ask my right honourable friend to support me in getting action to make sure that we can get that booster jab to my constituents who are not currently able to get it?
Mr. Speaker, firstly, my honourable friend is right to talk about the demand on GP services, and that is one reason why I announced just a few weeks ago the Winter Access Programme with a record amount of support, which will undoubtedly help. When it comes to the vaccination programme, GPs across the country are doing phenomenal work, but I want to make sure it's working in every part of the country, and if there's more that we can do in his area, we will. I'll be happy to meet with him.
Chris Bryan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to say I have been boosted. So I'm grateful. I'm not sure everybody's grateful, but I want to ask about long COVID, because there's lots of evidence now that people who suffer from long COVID have had long-term neurological changes, and that is sapping the other provision of services for other people with neurological conditions. I just wonder, isn't it time that we had a strategy for brain injury across the whole of government, including every single government department, and not just his own?
Mr. Speaker, I know that the honourable gentleman speaks with a great deal of experience on this issue and has talked about it many times in this House. And he's right to link this to long COVID, and I hope I can reassure him with the work that is going on within both the NHS, in the department, and some of the research institutes into long COVID that the government is supporting with millions of pounds, and then also the work the NHS is doing with people that are suffering from long COVID, and listening to them about what more we can do.
Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, whilst I was on a school visit, I was shocked to hear about the extraordinary abuse a head teacher had experienced from parents opposed to in-school vaccination clinics. And I'm glad to hear we are making progress on getting 12 to 15-year-olds vaccinated. But will you join me in encouraging schools to continue to do this? Thank them for all the work that they have been doing. And can he also tell me what more we can do to reassure parents and students alike that the vaccine is safe, it's effective, and it's in all our benefits?
Mr. Speaker, this is such an important issue, about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. And I think one of the strongest reassurances that we can give to everyone is that that decision about this vaccine, any vaccine, if it is safe and effective, is made independently to government, to ministers, by world-leading clinicians in the MHRA, our, as I say, independent regulator, looking at the very best evidence that is available, and they continue to monitor that data and that information. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, in my statement, that when it comes to vaccination, for example, of 16 and 17-year-olds, one of the reasons that the JCVI was very comfortable to make the recommendation to me to offer a second dose to that cohort was because of the continuing work being done by our clinicians and the MHRA working closely together. So I hope that helps reassure my honourable friend.
Steve McCabe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I note that earlier this year, when the government was trying to extend its vaccine delivery programme, it was keen to promote the benefit of mobile units. I see they don't figure at all in the statement today. Could the Secretary of State tell me how many mobile units are currently being deployed?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, this is all about making access as easy as possible. And as well as the national vaccination centres, the grab a jab offers, we do have mobile units. I'm afraid I couldn't tell you exactly how many we have out at any one time. The number does change day to day and depending on location. But it is something I think that remains an important part of giving as easy access as possible.
Brereton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have our walk-in vaccination clinic at Longton Fire Station on Friday. So will my right honourable friend join me in encouraging everybody in Stoke-on-Trent South who's yet to have their vaccination or needs their booster to come forward, come to the walk-in on Friday or get an appointment booked as soon as possible?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I happily join my honourable friend that if you live in Stoke-on-Trent South, you've got this great new this walk-in centre, and please go on Friday because the best way to protect yourselves, your loved ones, is to get vaccinated.
Mike Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. John Fagan from the Runcorn part of my constituency did the right thing and went for his booster jab last week. When he arrived, he was told they'd run out of supplies. What reassurance can the Secretary of State and the Department give me and my constituents, and actually the broader country, that there will be sufficient supplies for the booster rollout?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman understands I don't know the details of that particular situation, but I would like to reassure him and the House that for both, whether it's our boosters, offer of the Evergreen offer of vaccination, that the country has, the Vaccines Task Force has more than enough supply.
Speaker, can I welcome the Health Secretary's statement, the rollout of boosters to the 40 to 49-year-olds, and also the fact you'll be able to book 5 months after your jab rather than 6 months. I need to declare my interest on both counts there, but thank you very much, Secretary of State. Would he agree with me that given that booster increases protection from symptomatic COVID up to 90%, it's in my interest, everybody's interest, to get that as soon as possible to protect ourselves, our loved ones and the NHS?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. The facts and figures now speak for themselves, and this latest data that he has also just referred to that's come from UKHSA today, more than 90% protection when someone has had their booster dose, and that, as he says, is not just protection for that individual but for their loved ones.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The NHS is under severe pressure. Too many people are sick, including those which are vaccinated, and too many people are still dying. Why won't the Secretary of State meet with Directors of Public Health who are tearing their hairs out because the government rightly has put so much investment into the vaccine programme but aren't putting their investment into other public health measures which would stop COVID becoming a disease of inequality?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady will know it's, of course, as I've said today in the statement, that the vaccines are absolutely central to protecting us against this virus, but it would be wrong for anyone to suggest that's the only thing that the government is focusing on. Of course, there's a lot more, and for example, I can draw her attention to the recent announcements we've made on antivirals.
Rob Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The enthusiasm of 16 and 17-year-olds in the Aylesbury constituency to get the jab has been extremely impressive. So given that they are a particularly key age group in our fight against COVID, will my right honourable friend thank them for their contribution to tackling the pandemic? And can he let them know how soon they can expect to get the second jabs in their arms?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, the second doses for 16 to 70-year-olds will be available from Monday next week. Also, I would like to join him in thanking, in particular, the local schools for all the work that they have done in Aylesbury to help with that.
And finally, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I thank the Secretary of State for all his clear commitment to protecting all citizens in the United Kingdom where the control is. I'm a type 2 diabetic. This Saturday, between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, through the local surgery, I will receive my COVID booster, as other priority cases will as well. So can the Secretary of State outline what discussions has taken place to ensure that before over 40s are able to access their booster, that the vulnerable groups in all ages, such as diabetics, etc., can access their booster in a timely manner throughout the UK? Decisions taken in this House set the marker for other regions to follow, including Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I mean, one of the reasons the Honourable Gentleman will know is that our vaccination programme has been such a huge success is because it is truly a UK-wide programme, and we're able to do that because of the strength of our union. I work closely with my colleague in Northern Ireland, and we coordinate together, we share resources, and when it comes to supply, of course that supplies for the whole United Kingdom, and in terms of making sure that people that might be particularly vulnerable have access, each of the devolved administrations has a slightly different approach, but we do work closely together and make sure the supply is there.
Thank you. That concludes that item of business. So now we come to statement by the Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Before I begin today's statement, I would like to say a few words about the sickening attack that took place yesterday morning outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital. On behalf of the whole House, I want to pay tribute to the swift and professional response by the extraordinary men and women of the emergency services, who once again showed themselves to be the very best among us. The Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre has today raised the nationwide threat level from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. The police are keeping both myself and the Home Secretary informed on developments, and we will, of course, in turn, keep the House updated on the investigation as it continues. And now, Madam Deputy Speaker, with your permission, I should like to make a statement on the United Nations Climate Change Conference, better known as COP26, which took place in the magnificent city of Glasgow over the past 2 weeks. It was the biggest political gathering of any kind ever held in the United Kingdom. 194 countries were represented. We had around 120 heads of state and government, 38,000 accredited delegates, and there were countless tens of thousands more in the streets and parks and venues outside. It was a summit that many people predicted would fail, and a summit that I fear some quietly wanted to fail. Yet it was a summit that proved the doubters and the cynics wrong, because COP26 did not just succeed in keeping 1.5 alive, it succeeded in doing something no UN climate conference has ever done before, by uniting the world in calling time on coal. In 25 previous COPs, all the way back to Berlin in 1995, not one delivered a mandate to remove so much as a single lump of coal from one power station boiler. For decades, tackling the single biggest cause of carbon emissions proved to be as challenging as eating the proverbial elephant. It was just so big that no one knew quite where to start. But in Glasgow, Madam Deputy Speaker, we took the first bite, because we have secured a global commitment to phasing down coal, and as John Kerry pointed out, you can't phase out coal without first phasing it down as we transition to other cleaner energy sources. And we have, for the first time, a worldwide recognition that we won't get climate change under control as long as our power stations are consuming vast quantities of the sedimentary super polluter that is coal. That alone is a great achievement, But we haven't just signalled the beginning of the end for coal, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've ticked our boxes on cars, cash and trees as well. The companies that build a quarter of the world's automobiles have agreed to stop building carbon emission vehicles by 2035. And cities from Sao Paulo to Seattle have pledged to ban them from their streets. We've pioneered a whole new model, an intellectual breakthrough that sees billions in climate finance, development bank investment and so forth being used to trigger trillions from the private sector to drive the big decarbonisation programmes in countries like South Africa. And we've done something that absolutely none of the commentators saw coming, by building a coalition of more than 130 countries to protect up to 90% of our forests around the world, those great natural soakers of carbon. Mr. Speaker, none of this was a happy accident or inevitability. The fact that we were there at all in the face of a global pandemic is in itself the result of a vast and complex effort involving countless moving parts. Right until the very end, there was the real prospect that no agreement would be reached. And what has been achieved has only come about thanks to month after month of concerted British diplomacy, the countless meetings, the innumerable phone calls, the banging of heads at UNGA, Petersburg dialogue, at President Biden's climate summit, the Security Council, the G7, the G20, and the setting of an example, several examples by the UK, because again and again the task of our negotiators was made easier by the fact that the UK wasn't asking anyone to do anything that we aren't doing ourselves. Yeah. We've slashed our use of coal so much that our last 2 coal-fired power stations will go offline for good in 2024. Yeah. We've more than doubled our climate finance, providing vital support for poor and vulnerable nations around the world. We've made a legally binding commitment to reach net zero, the first major economy to do so. Yeah. We've set a date at which hydrocarbon internal combustion engines will reach the end of the road. And we've shown the world that it is possible to grow your economy by cutting carbon, creating markets for clean technology, and delivering new green jobs that reduce emissions and increase prosperity. Every one of those achievements was not just great news for our country and our planet, but another arrow in the quiver of our fantastic team in Glasgow. Yeah. A team led by the COP president, my right honourable friend, the member for Reading West. Yeah. And from the moment he picked up the COP reins, he has been absolutely tireless in his efforts to secure the change that we need. And although I'm pretty sure that what he really needs now is a well-earned break, I don't think any of us here are going to be able to restrain him, to hold him back, as he sets off pushing countries to go further still and making sure that the promises made in Glasgow are delivered and not diluted. But success has many parents, and I want to say a huge thank you also to the officials in my own COP unit, Downing Street and across government, in embassies, UK embassies around the world, and at the United Nations, who pulled out all the stops to make the event work and to shepherd through the agreements that have been reached. I also want to thank everybody on the ground at the SEC in Glasgow, security, catering, transport, the relentlessly cheery volunteers, the police from across the whole country who kept everybody safe from harm, and the public health authorities who kept us safe from COVID, and everyone in the Scottish Government. And I want to say, above all, a big, big thank you to the people of Glasgow, who had to put up with so much disruption in their city and who welcomed the world all the same. And I say to the people of Glasgow, we could not have done it without you. Is there still more to do? Well, of course, there is. And I'm not for one moment suggesting that we can safely close the book on climate change In fact, I can think of nothing more dangerous, quite right, I can think of nothing more dangerous than patting ourselves on the back, Madam Deputy Speaker, and telling ourselves that the job is done. Because this job will not be complete until the whole world has not only set off on the goal to reach net zero, but arrived at that destination. A goal that, even with the best of intentions from all actors, cannot be achieved overnight. And while COP26 has filled me with optimism about our ability to get there, I cannot now claim to be certain that we will, because we have seen some countries that really should know better dragging their heels about their Paris commitments. But if, not this one, but if, and it is still a massive if, they make good on their pledges, then I believe that Glasgow will be remembered as the place where we secured a historic agreement and the world began to turn the tide. Before Paris, we were on course for 4 degrees of warming. After Paris, that number fell to a still catastrophically dangerous 3 degrees. This afternoon, after the Glasgow Climate Pact, it stands at close to 2. It's still too high. The numbers are still too hot. The warming is still excessive. But it's closer than we have ever been to the relative safety of 1.5 degrees, and now with an all-new roadmap to help us get there. Aristotle taught us that virtue comes not from reasoning and instruction, but from habit and from practice. So the success of the Glasgow Climate Pact lies not just in the promises, but in the move that the whole world has now made, from setting abstract targets to adopting the nuts and bolts programme of work to meet those targets and to reduce CO2 emissions. We're now talking about the how rather than the what, and getting into a habit of cutting CO2 that is catching on with not just with governments and businesses, but with billions of people around the world. And it is for that reason that I believe the COP26 in Glasgow has been a success, and that 1.5 is still alive, and that is something I believe that every person in our United Kingdom can and should take immense pride in, and I commend this statement to the House.
Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in extending our thoughts across the House to the people of Liverpool who are in shock at yesterday's events and pay tribute to the response of the emergency services? Madam Deputy Speaker, can I start by paying tribute to the COP President? Whatever the shortcomings of the deal, his diligence, his integrity and his commitment to the climate are clear for all to see. And also to his team of civil servants. Their dedication, their expertise, their service, never in doubt, but always remarkable. They knew that COP26 was the most important international summit ever hosted on these shores. Why, Madam Deputy Speaker? The simple maths of the climate crisis. At Paris, we set out the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. That is the tipping point, beyond that, the world is set to see billions of people facing extreme heat waves, countless millions displaced from their homes, and the destruction of natural wonders like the world's coral reefs. The science doesn't negotiate, and no politician can move the goalposts. To have any hope of 1.5 degrees, we must halve global emissions by 2030. The task of Glasgow was to set out credible plans for delivering that. And whilst the summit has been one of modest progress, we cannot kid ourselves. Plans to cut emissions are still way short. The pledges made in Glasgow for 2013, even if all fully implemented, represent less than 25% of the ambition required. Rather than a manageable 1.5 degrees, they put us on track for a devastating 2.4 degrees. And that's why, according to the UN Secretary-General, the goal of 1.5 degrees is now on life support. So we need to deliver intensive care. And that starts by being honest about what's gone wrong. International negotiations are complex and they are difficult. And those that have dragged their feet the most bear the greatest responsibility. But the summit was held back by the Prime Minister's guileless boosterism, which only served to embolden the big emitters. The Prime Minister praised inadequate net zero plans. He called the Australia plans heroic, even though their plan was so slow that it was in line with 4 degrees of global warming. By providing this cover, the Prime Minister had little chance of exerting influence over the other big emitters, and we saw many more disappointing national plans. The Prime Minister also dressed up modest sectoral commitments as transformational. Earlier in COP, the government claimed that 190 countries and organisations had agreed to end coal. On closer inspection, only 46 of them were countries. Of those, only 23 were new signatories, and of those 23, 10 do not even use coal. And the 13 that remained did not include the biggest coal users, China, the US, India and Australia. And as things move forward with no public pressure, the big emitters were emboldened. They clubbed together later in COP to gut the main deal's wording on coal. Only someone who thinks that promises are meaningless could now argue that an agreement to phase down coal is the same as an agreement to phase it out. Yeah. And then there was the long overdue £100 billion in climate finance. It's still not been delivered, even though this money was promised to developing countries over a decade ago. Failure to deliver has damaged trust and created a huge obstacle to building the coalition that can drive action climate between the most vulnerable developing countries and ambitious developed countries. That coalition was the foundation of the landmark Paris Agreement in 2015, creating the pincer movement to maximise pressure on the world's biggest emitters, including China. It's deeply regrettable that at Glasgow we did not see a repeat. Instead, developing countries were still having to make the case for the long-promised $100 billion in the final hours of the summit. Given all of this and the imperative to revive the 1.5 degrees from life support, the question is this: what is going to be different in the next year in the run-up to COP27? And Britain has a special and particular responsibility as COP President. First, we need to reassemble the Paris Climate Coalition and build trust with the developing world. But cutting overseas aid does not build trust, it destroys it. So will the Prime Minister immediately commit to reversing those cuts? Second, there can be no free passes for major emitters, including our friends. We are doing a trade deal with Australia, where we have allowed them to drop Paris temperature commitments. That was a mistake. Will the Prime Minister put it right? Third, the Prime Minister is right to say we need to power past coal and phase out fossil fuels. But his ability to lead on the issue internationally has been hampered by his actions at home. It has never made sense for the government to be flirting with a new coal mine or to greenlight the Cambo oil field. So will he rewrite the planning framework to rule out coal, and will he now say no to Cambo? Yeah. Finally, will he sort out the Chancellor? The budget was delivered In the week before COP26, as world leaders began to arrive on these shores, it did not even mention climate change. It gave a tax break for domestic flights and fell woefully short of the investment needed to deliver green jobs and a fair transition. The Prime Minister has been the wrong man in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Glasgow has been a missed opportunity, a stumble forward when we needed to make great strides, more climate delay when we needed delivery, and 1.5 degrees is now on life support. We still have the chance to keep 1.5 degrees alive, but only with intensive care. We have to speak honestly about the challenge we face to rebuild the coalition that we need and to take on the big emitters. We can and we must change course. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Prime Minister.
Well, if I may say so, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's the usual pathetic attempt by the leader of the opposition to suck and blow at once. To congratulate the UK government for a success at COP, but somehow to attack myself. That's what he was trying to do, and I think it's pathetic. Let's take his points in turn. Australia signs up to net zero for the first time ever. Coal. No COP has ever mentioned phasing out coal before, Madam Deputy Speaker. 65 countries committed to phasing it out altogether by 2040, including the 4 biggest users of coal-fired power stations, Poland, Indonesia, and others. And Madam Deputy Speaker, he talks about climate finance, and the UK government rescinding its commitments. It is simply untrue, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have doubled our commitments to tackling climate change around the world and helping the developed world with £12.6 billion, as he knows full well, and that commitment is way outstrips what most other countries are making. And he talks about UK leadership throughout this campaign, which has been going on for 2 years to get the right result and to keep 1.5 alive. The UK has been way out in front under this government. We were the first major economy to legislate for net zero. 90% of the world has now followed us. At COP, we had one of the most ambitious NDCs, nationally determined contributions, of any country. If it hadn't been for the UK government, we would have had no inclusion of anything to do with nature and protecting forests at all, Madam Deputy Speaker. And they listened to us at COP because they knew that our 10-point plan was not only cutting emissions, but helping to generate hundreds of thousands of new high-wage, high-skill jobs. And that is how the world can see that is a programme that will enable them to power past carbon and to develop their economies. And as a result of everything that we have done at COP, we have been able, Madam Deputy Speaker, to keep 1.5 alive. And I feel, listening to the Right Honourable Gentleman, he's finding it very, very difficult to reconcile himself to the fact of a United Kingdom diplomatic and environmental success. And I think if he really meant all those fine words with which he began about UK negotiators and about the COP, he should stick to that script, because that was the right one.
Theresa May. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I refer the House to my entry in the Members' Register. May I first of all echo the remarks made by my right honourable friend about the appalling attack in Liverpool, and the thoughts of everybody in this House are with the people of Liverpool. Can I congratulate the UK Presidency on significant commitments that were made at COP26, notably by governments on deforestation and methane, but also by individual businesses on their work to achieve net zero in their businesses. Can I say to my right honourable friend that I'm sure he agrees with me that there is much more to be done. He said it in his statement. The UK has an absolutely critical role over the next year with the COP presidency to ensure that those commitments made are delivered on, and to bring the intransigent countries, notably China, Russia and India, back round the table, and to raise their sights on what they are willing to achieve. Will my right honourable friend agree that, and also set out what the government's immediate plans are for that work?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right about the vital importance of the private sector, and I think that this COP was a breakthrough in many ways, but not least because of the emphasis that it placed on getting the private sector in to help developing countries in particular to meet their carbon targets. But she's also right, Madam Deputy Speaker, in what she says about the role of the COP presidency, because my right honourable friend, the President of COP, continues in his office for a year, and we will use that period, working with our Egyptian friends who take over for COP27, we will use that period to hold our friends and partners around the world to account for what they have promised, because it's only if they keep to what they have promised that we will be able to deliver for our children, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that's what we intend to do.
Ian Blackfoot.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister on the terror of the attack that we saw in Liverpool yesterday. We all stand together against those that would perpetuate such crimes. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of his statement, and I'm delighted that today the Prime Minister has remembered that COP happened in Glasgow rather than in Edinburgh, as he said last night. Maybe he could have led more from the front at COP if he had actually known what Scottish city the conference was taking place in. But in fairness, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is right to acknowledge that there was at least one member of the UK Government who committed himself passionately to the Glasgow conference. The UK President of COP, the member for Reading West, deserves credit and the thanks for the role that he has played over the course of the last few weeks and months. Madam Deputy Speaker, we all know that the Glasgow Climate Pact is far from everything it should be, but it does contain many positives for us to build on. Whether or not it succeeds now depends entirely on whether countries deliver on the commitments they made, and we need to hold them to that. And that is the only way to truly keep 1.5 degrees target alive and make sure that ultimately that we accept all of our responsibilities to deliver on that. If that urgent leadership is to be shown, then the example of that leadership needs to be given at home. The Scottish Government led on climate justice throughout COP. We were the first country to pledge funds for loss and damage to help those vulnerable countries who have contributed least to climate change but are suffering its worst effects. This is about reparation, not charity. So will the Prime Minister reverse his cuts to international aid and follow our First Minister's lead? Will he back and contribute to the creation of a loss and damage facility? The Glasgow Climate Pact also contains a commitment to increase nationally determined contributions by the end of 2022. So, can the Prime Minister confirm that the UK will urgently update its own NDC commitments? And meeting our targets also means rapidly increasing investment in green jobs. Prior to recess, the Prime Minister made a commitment to go and look again at the issue of investment in tidal stream energy. So now that the Prime Minister has presumably looked into this, can he today commit to a ring-fence fund of £71 million for tidal stream energy as part of the Contracts for Difference process? And finally, on carbon capture and storage. Now, I know that the Prime Minister is expecting a question, and I make no apology for the fact that I will keep asking these questions until promises are made to Scotland's North East are finally delivered. And let's not forget, the UK Exchequer has taken £350 billion of tax revenues out of the North Sea oil. It's now our responsibility to make sure that we invest in carbon capture and storage. Last week, INEOS added their voice to the growing shock and anger that Track 1 status for the Acorn project was rejected by the UK Government. So will the Prime Minister reverse this devastating decision and back the Scottish cluster?
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman, and I should say that, of course, that just taking his points in reverse order, the Acorn project remains a strong contender, as I've told him several times across this dispatch box. He shouldn't give up hope. It's a very interesting project. We will look at it on our NDCs. The UK is already compliant with 1.5 as a result of the pledges that we've made. both by 2030 and 2035. So if we can deliver on those, then we will be able to. We believe we'll be able to restrain our emissions. I've told him before that I'm interested in tidal power. And I'm interested in contracts for difference for tidal power, and I think he's right that there should be investment by the government in making sure that we have a tidal power industry in this country in the way that we have a wind power and a solar power industry in this country, because all the evidence is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the costs come down, and that is the role of government. And finally, on his point about the whereabouts of COP, as he will well understand, Madam Deputy Speaker, it would never have been in Scotland at all. It would never have been in Scotland at all had Scotland not been part of the United Kingdom.
Greg Clark.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I join the warm congratulations to the COP President and to his team? And in terms of the location, to acknowledge the role of my right honourable friend for Maidenhead in securing COP in the UK and Glasgow to give us the opportunity for this great exercise of British diplomacy. Will the Prime Minister recognise that during the year ahead, as well as holding countries to their contributions, there is the important opportunity to make scientific progress and progress in innovation, which will be at least as important in securing the ambitions that were inked in Glasgow? And will he say a bit about how UK leadership over the year ahead can advance our ambitions in that score as well?
I thank him very much, and as he knows, the UK has virtually doubled our investment in R&D, and Sir Patrick Vallance, the government's chief scientific advisor, has said we want to focus on climate change, on green technology under the National Science and Technology Council, and that's why we're putting almost £22 billion into R&D. The opportunities are immense, and the opportunity to reduce the cost for the consumer of heat pumps, of electric vehicles and other green technology is also immense.
Ed Davey.
Can I associate myself and my party with the Prime Minister's remarks on the horrific attacks in Liverpool? Madam Deputy Speaker, we'd all hoped that the UK would lead the world to a bold agreement at Glasgow to turn the tide on dangerous climate change. Despite the efforts of the COP President and the excellent UK negotiating team, regrettably, the agreement fell short, potentially dangerously so. Yet there's still an opportunity for the UK to drive global climate action by cleaning up the City of London. Fossil fuel investors raise billions of pounds in this very city for coal and oil projects around the world. While China and India did stop a better deal on fossil fuels at COP, they can't stop the Prime Minister from showing leadership here in London. So will the Prime Minister stop dirty fossil fuel money for global coal and oil projects from being raised here in the City of London?
Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman knows very well that after UK leadership, we secured at COP an end to the financing of coal around the world, of the end of international financing for coal around the world. China has done that. That's led to a number of other countries immediately following suit. And progress is being made. The UK is, as I said in my opening statement, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK is also abandoning export support for hydrocarbons, and we are going to be followed by other countries around the world.
Andrew Mitchell.
It's clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the COP in Glasgow has gone better than many of us feared, but there are, as I'm sure my right honourable friend would agree, no possible grounds for any complacency. Will he use the remainder of the UK presidency to redouble efforts to share excess vaccine doses with developing countries? Quite apart from making us safer in the UK, it will also bolster internationalism and British international leadership in the meetings ahead envisaged in the Glasgow Agreement.
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend, and yes, indeed, although vaccines were not discussed at COP per se, there was a long discussion at the G20 in Rome, and the UK has a fantastic record of supporting cost vaccines around the world, 1.5 billion AstraZeneca doses, to say nothing of the huge contributions that the UK has made both to Gavi and to COVAX to ensure that people around the world get vaccinated, because nobody is safe, Madam Deputy Speaker, until everybody is safe.
George Howarth.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for the comments he made about the appalling attack in Liverpool yesterday? And having spent some years on the Intelligence and Security Committee, I'm aware of the fact that in many attacks, those involved in it, I know it's too early to say at this point, were on the radar of the security services. If that proves to be the case in this incident, will the Prime Minister undertake to look at how those cases are kept under review? And can I add my voice to others who have said on COP26, it's really important going forward that those who are currently standing outside the tent of those who agree are brought into it. So can he give us some indication of his strategy for doing that?
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend on his point about picking up potential terrorists earlier. He's absolutely right, and he will know from his work on the ISC that the potential for cross-tabulating, referring between the various data points that we have is, I think, the way forward, and that may help us if we can do it in a sensitive way to predict more of the problems that have been cropping up. As for bringing in people into the tent, I think he's referring to ensuring that everybody in the developing world feels that they are being properly represented in these conversations. Is that what I do? Yeah. So I see. He's talking about India and China and others, and I'm sorry, Madam, it wasn't entirely clear. I think the House will forgive me. It wasn't entirely clear from his question which people he wanted. I want everybody brought into the tent for the avoidance of time. And with India and China, with India in particular, what needs to happen is that we need to work with the Indian government that are already doing some very impressive things to show how, with new technology, we can help that country to power past coal. They're already with the One Sun World One Grid project. They've got a huge amount of renewables already going, but the UK can take a leading role with partners around the world, building the coalitions of support and investment by the private sector to help even an economy as huge as India's to make this transition and make it much farther and much faster, Madam Deputy Speaker, than people currently think possible. Look at the speed with which the UK has done it. Other countries around the world can do the same.
Andrew Murison.
Can I congratulate the Prime Minister on his Glasgow achievements? Can he say what is being done to remedy the international shortage of critical minerals to make semiconductors, without which the achievement of our 2035 targets will be impossible? And what more can he do to grow our own Silicon Valleys to reduce our reliance on China and Taiwan?
Prime Minister.
My right honourable friend makes an extremely important point. The resources are there, there are adequate supplies. The problem lies in the supply chains. And that is an issue that we are working on together with our American friends and other partners around the world to ensure that there is no disruption in those supplies of critical things, particularly semiconductors.
Barry Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, may I pay tribute to the Right Honourable Member for Reading West. He has gained enormous international respect for the diligent, courteous and tenacious way in which he conducted the negotiations as President of COP26. Given that Article 4 of the Glasgow Climate Pact requires us to accelerate the phasing out of fossil fuel subsidies, can the Prime Minister tell us whether the 130% super tax deductions announced by the Chancellor will now have a climate filter imposed so that the taxpayer does not end up paying the full cost of projects like the Cambo oil field, and whether the government will use the $27.5 billion windfall from the IMF special drawing rights to significantly scale up their provision of climate finance to developing countries as demanded under Articles 3 and 5.
What I can certainly tell him is that the 125% super deduction that he rightly refers to will be of great assistance to companies across the whole of the UK in investing in new, clean, green technology, and that is the way forward.
Laura Farris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the most significant diplomatic achievements of the COP was getting 130 countries, including the US and the BRIC economies, to agree to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. However, we have been here before with the New York Declaration in 2014, which ultimately was unsuccessful because it lacked any enforcement mechanism. Could my right honourable friend say how he thinks this time we can ensure that it will be different?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and my honourable friend makes an absolutely crucial point. And this time it will be different, Madam Deputy Speaker, because what happened at COP26 in Glasgow was that you had about 40 leading global financial institutions that pledged that they would no longer invest in companies that supported or made their money out of deforestation. And you also had the companies themselves, big commodities companies whose names I'm sure my honourable friend would be familiar with, saying that they would no longer invest in products that were grown as a result of deforestation across the world. And the agency for holding both those sets of businesses, both the banks, financial institutions and the companies to account, will be customers, will be account holders, will be consumers across the whole world who will take their investment away from those companies if they fail to honour those commitments. And that is a huge change that's taking place across the world.
Jessica Morden.
It's a welcome acknowledgement at COP that the world cannot decarbonise without steel, whether it be for wind turbines, electric vehicles, energy-efficient buildings or infrastructure. Yet it was very disappointing that in the budget there was little to support the steel industry to decarbonise, little help with energy prices and no mention of the already small Green Steel Fund. So what practically are the government going to do to support our industry? Nuts and bolts, as the Prime Minister said earlier.
Prime Minister.
Well, it's always worth remembering, Madam Deputy Speaker, that steel output fell by 50% under the Labour government because of their reckless mismanagement of the energy issue. What we've done is put about £600 million into relief for the steel industry to help it cope with high energy costs, and a £315 million fund to transform steel and help it to move towards clean, green energy. That's what's needed, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Alberto Costa.
I thank the Prime Minister and the Honourable Member for Reading West and all the teams for the enormous work that they've done in putting together a great programme of the UK in partnership with Italy hosting COP26. Can I ask the Prime Minister to reassure the good people of South Leicestershire, and for that matter the country, that the agreement that his government has entered into and the policies and bills that he'll bring before this Parliament won't just help improve the climate, but will bring brilliant jobs to the people of South Leicestershire as part of the Green Deal economy that we're all looking forward to?
Prime Minister.
Yes, I thank my honourable friend. I should have renewed my thanks to the Italian presidency of the G20, co-presidency of COP, and Mario Draghi, who did an outstanding job throughout the period. And yes, he's totally right, because the Green Industrial Revolution, the 10-point plan, in the year since it was the 10 points were put forward to business around the world, they've secured £15 billion in investment in green technology in this country, many tens of thousands of high-wage, high-skilled jobs, and that is the future, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. New Delhi is now heading into a pollution lockdown because of the emissions that have affected the people there. The poorest people in the poorest places all around the world suffer the worst from pollution. So can he tell us what is he going to seriously do to bring China, Russia and Australia and others on board to get rid of their coal production? And also, the answer that he gave to the member for Kingston Surbiton was less than clear. Can he be absolutely now clear there will be no British financing whatsoever for any new fossil fuel industries anywhere in the world?
Prime Minister.
Yes, so that's on the first point of the last point you made. Yes, of course that's right. We're abandoning export finance, and I made that clear earlier on. We're abandoning export finance for the hydrocarbons industry, and that's a massive change, which has been difficult, because there are businesses in this country that have benefited from that export finance for many years, but we're making that change because we want the world to move away from hydrocarbons. As for what he says about India, I accept the points that he makes, but what we will do, as I think I said earlier on, is we will help the Indian government in any way that we can for them to move beyond coal as fast as they can. And actually, of course, it was disappointing to see the language changed from phase out to phase down, but we've never had any commitments on coal, whatever, in COP before. I think what will now happen is actually that the global peer pressure on countries to move away from coal will intensify very rapidly, and the change will happen much faster than people think.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. After the downfall of the Soviet Union, it was discovered that various multilateral agreements that we thought we had over things like biological weapons had been systematically flouted. What confidence can we have if open societies observe the rules but closed societies cheat? Is there a regime in play to make sure that we would discover that?
Prime Minister.
One of the things that we agreed at this COP, and one of the reasons I believe it is so historic, is that we finally agreed the Paris rulebook, which contains, amongst other things, provisions for transparency, agreement about how we measure what we're trying to do around the world. That's immensely significant. And that gives a tool to everybody who cares about it. And even in closed societies, about which my right honourable friend knows a great deal, even in closed societies where they may not take voters very seriously, there are consumers that they take seriously, and people who are willing to protest, who they take seriously as well.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The President of COP has undoubtedly done an excellent job, but frankly that's no thanks to the Prime Minister, who has consistently undermined climate leadership, whether that's by going ahead with an oil field at Cambo or cutting aid. 1.5 degrees is hanging by a thread, and the vulnerable countries feel betrayed, so a little bit more humility might be in order. But the Prime Minister says that we're not asking others to do anything that we're not doing ourselves. Will he demonstrate that's the case by requesting an urgent and transparent audit by the OBR, independent of the Treasury, of all our own domestic fossil fuel subsidies, with a view to phasing them out as soon as possible, yes or no?
Again, I think she's rather like the right honourable gentleman. She's trying to have it both ways, to suck and blow at once. She can't say it was a successful COP and somehow attack the UK government. I really don't. I simply fail to see the logic. And what we are doing, what we are also doing, is we are moving beyond coal by 2024.
Order. Mustn't shout at the Prime Minister. Everyone will have a chance to ask their question, and the honourable lady certainly mustn't shout at me. Let's try again. Sir Edward Lee.
Go for it. Could I urge the Prime Minister and other world leaders not to get ahead of public opinion on this? The people of Gainsborough South West Ward, which I represent, the 27th most deprived ward in the entire country, are not so much worried about the future of the Great Barrier Reef in 50 years' time. They're worried about their great big bloody heating bills now. And they are heavily reliant on gas, of which we have abundant supply. And manufacturers in northern levelling up towns are worried about their competitiveness with China as more and more regulations are imposed on them. And to be fair to India, there are millions living in Uttar Pradesh, living in dire poverty, whose emissions are very low. How do we represent them? They live, their whole future depends now, this minute, on fossil fuels. Otherwise they might literally starve. Be realistic.
Prime Minister.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend. Of course, we must be realistic, but what we have seen is that it is entirely realistic to move very rapidly to renewable energy and to see the cost of that renewable energy fall vertiginously, as it has done. 60% the cost of wind has fallen just since 2015. Solar likewise. And so I urge him to tell his wonderful electorate in Gainsborough that this is a massive opportunity for us. We have first mover advantage, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're going, as we did in the first industrial revolution, we're going with this green industrial revolution now, and I believe it will be of massive long-term benefit to people across this country.
Barry Sherman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, will the Prime Minister agree with me that if we've got hope, any hope, of keeping 1.5 alive, we need to liberate the President to lead with all party support, a kind of revolution across our country, working together across party to involve every community, every town, every city, because if we don't grasp this, with our constituents and with the people that we represent, we won't get there. It is vital that this becomes a campaign with great leadership, but with full support of every community in the land.
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman. If he's offering full support from the opposition benches to the government, then I think he's absolutely right.
Andrew Salut.
Doesn't the landmark agreement to support South Africa's just transition show that even economies heavily dependent on coal can seize a bright and sustainable future and strengthen their economies as well as the UK's?
I thank my right honourable friend who is the trade envoy to South Africa. And I thank the government of South Africa, led by Cyril Ramaphosa, who has taken an extraordinary step and has built an international coalition for South Africa to decarbonise its energy system. It won't necessarily be easy, but it's a way that we can have a just transition for South Africa, and countries around the world, including the UK, are coming together to do it. That is the model for progress that we can make with so many of the big emitters, as the gentleman, right honourable member for Knowsley, was saying. That's the way forward with the big emitters around the world.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. All of the commitments made by countries in Glasgow only have credibility to the extent that they are backed up by plans at home to deliver on the promised emissions reductions. It's now a question of counting. Let's take an example. Eventually, all of the 23 million gas boilers in this country are going to have to go. The government says its target is for there to be installed by 2028, 600,000 heat pumps a year. The Heat and Building Strategy, recently published, provides enough funding to help support the installation of 30,000 a year. Why is the government's plan for decarbonising home heating so far short of what is required?
Prime Minister.
He's making an important point about the need to decarbonise our heating, but it can be done. There is great variety in the housing stock of the UK, and I believe if we go on the track that we are with investment, priming the market, we will be able to bring down radically the cost of ground source heat pumps and all the other ways that you can give people the heating they need in a clean, green way. That's what we're going to do.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I congratulate the Prime Minister, the COP President and your teams on your historic achievements in Glasgow. For me, it was reassuring to attend the conference and see nature and sustainable farming at the heart of the programme. Does my right honourable friend agree that food production and looking after the environment go hand in hand? And this is what our fantastic British farmers do each and every day.
Prime Minister.
I passionately agree with that, and I know that UK farming is getting cleaner and greener the whole time, and I pay tribute to the UK farming industry, which leads the world in setting standards.
Deirdre Brock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Commitments are one thing, actions are another. For the UK to deliver on its promises and commitments in the COP26 agreement, a renewable transition must occur and must be supported by the government. Will the Prime Minister commit to at least matching the Scottish Government's £500 million Just Transition Fund to help drive the move to renewable energy, meet the UK's emissions reduction obligations, while making sure that workers aren't left behind?
Prime Minister.
The honourable lady is right that just transition is vital, but that's why we're investing £12.6 billion around the world, and billions, 26 billion here in this country, to help the transition to a clean, green economy, whilst creating 440,000 new high-quality jobs.
Jason McCartney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to congratulate the Prime Minister and the President of COP for their leadership up in Glasgow. And would the Prime Minister agree with me, we can continue to show leadership by continuing to reduce our carbon emissions, by getting cars and freight off the roads, and by reducing the need for domestic flights. And the way we can do that, Madam Deputy Speaker, is investing in high-speed rail, investing in east-west connectivity, investing in Northern Powerhouse Rail, and investing in local rail connections like the Huddersfield-Penistone-Sheffield line.
Prime Minister.
Can I congratulate my honourable friend on his plug for the Huddersfield-Penistone-Sheffield line? As he knows, I'm a passionate enthusiast for new rail schemes. He'll be hearing a lot more in the IRP later on this week.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister was sent to Glasgow to keep 1.5 alive and left it in intensive care. A year ago, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister committed to the Bio-Yorkshire project, which is Yorkshire's Green New Deal. Yet in a year, not a penny delivered, nor a Green New Deal job delivered. So will he turn his words into action and support the Green New Deal?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think any government in history has done more to support green technology and green jobs across the whole of the country. As I've just said to the Honourable Lady, 440,000 new jobs we are creating as a result of the investments that we're making. We are transforming the UK, including Yorkshire, with a green industrial revolution, and that's how we're going to continue.
Robert Jenrick.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think the Prime Minister is right to say the whole country should take pride in the manner in which the UK has hosted the COP talks in the last few weeks. One of the things that characterised COP26 was the much greater and more meaningful involvement of business than previous COPs. How can we ensure that continues and becomes one of the defining characteristics of the remainder of the UK's COP presidency?
My right honourable friend makes an excellent point. I think that was, if anything, one of the most important defining characteristics of this COP, and the role of business is now seen to be critical by partners around the world. The new country platforms that we're creating will only be possible, Madam Deputy Speaker, with the help of the trillions of private sector investment.
Darren Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Prime Minister take this opportunity to show that Britain leads by her actions and not by her words, and reopen the UK-Australia trade deal, which notoriously relegated climate commitments to get the deal over the line?
Sorry,
Prime Minister.
Australia has made the first ever commitment to net zero, and actually, Madam Deputy, if you want to look at UK leadership, we were the first country to commit to a major economy to commit to net zero. We've got 90% of the world now committed to it, and even by the grudging, mealy-mouthed words we've heard from the party opposite, it's pretty clear that the overwhelming impression, even from the opposite benches, is that COP26 in Glasgow was a considerable success.
Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UK has an enviable record of phasing out coal because of the success of our renewables sector. And I should know about this because the Norfolk coast is the capital of Saudi with all of its wind power generation, as the Prime Minister has said before. So with that in mind, would the Prime Minister be at absolute speed to get the regulatory and legal framework changed so we can implement an offshore transmission network and stop the damaging cable corridors that connect piecemeal into our national grid?
Prime Minister.
My honourable friend is absolutely right in what he says. We've proceeded at such pace, Madam Deputy Speaker, that what's happened is that the cables come ashore in a way that is confused and very far from optimal. We need to make sure that we work with the regulator to have a proper grid to bring the energy onshore in an organised way, and that work is underway.
Margaret Farrier.
Wasn't expecting that, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd first of all like to thank the COP President's parliamentary team that were there in Glasgow for helping MPs navigate their way around the event. A number of commitments were made in aviation at COP, acknowledging the need for change to be sustainable for the industry. I've raised many times the financial difficulties faced by the industry presently. What will the government do to support the industry in decarbonising and meeting Jet Zero without it becoming too great a financial burden?
Prime Minister.
I thank her very much, and what we're doing is supporting the campaign for Jet Zero. We want the UK to lead the world in making sure that planes can fly without using tons of kerosene, and there are many attractive technologies. It won't be easy, but we want the whole world to come together and fix this, and we're setting an ambitious target of getting more sustainable aviation fuel into tanks by 2030, and also going for electric planes for short haul.
Steve Brine.
Many thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I just add my thanks to the Prime Minister and the unflappable, the unstoppable COP President sat beside him. It's very plain to hear that the Prime Minister and the COP President have really put themselves out there, and I think they've done the country and the world a great service. On coal, the agreement is welcome, and the Prime Minister has been very honest, as has the President said, that of course it could have been better. But I wonder if he'd concur on coal, that the direction of travel is now crystal clear, and the pressure on India and China and the other sort of coal-addicted nations is only going to increase now. So will he commit his government to use every resource that we have at our disposals to finish the job on coal?
Yes.
Prime Minister.
Yes, I thank my honourable friend. He's totally right. And the way to finish the job on coal is to show countries that are having difficulties powering past coal that the technology does exist, and using our new country platforms to bring in the private sector and to help us fix it. And that's what's going to happen.
We have been considering this subject now for an hour, which is the normal time for a statement, but this is a historically important statement, so I would like to make sure that everybody who wishes to ask a question has the opportunity to do so, but they really will have to be short questions now. And I'm slightly concerned about the Prime Minister's voice. I'm sure the Prime Minister isn't concerned, but I'm concerned about the Prime Minister's voice. And it would be a terrible thing if he were prevented from other things on which he has to make speeches in the near future because we keep him at the dispatch box for too long. Now, Prime Minister is not concerned, but nevertheless, we will be as quick as possible now because there's other business to get on to. Liam Byrne.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister probably admits that the weakest link of the deal was the lack of progress on defunding the polluters. The catchily named GFANS initiative disappointed many, and what that now means is that 1,400 of the world's 2,000 biggest companies don't have net zero targets. Their combined turnover, nearly $15 trillion. But most pension savers are funding them because the information isn't there in their accounts. When will that great deficit, Prime Minister, be fixed?
Prime Minister.
He's making a very important point, and the power of consumers and pension holders, investors, is enormous. We're looking at everything we can to encourage all companies to follow suit. Peer pressure, social pressure, is going to have a massive influence.
John Barron.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There's been real progress at COP26, and I think we should all be very grateful to its President and the Prime Minister for achieving so much. But the Prime Minister will be aware that we have to keep countries' feet close to the fire. What a reassurance can he provide that the annual progress reports have real teeth, so leaders can be held accountable for the progress required in the short term in order to ensure that climate change targets are met in the long term?
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend again. The most important tool that we have now is transparent data. We agreed the Paris rulebook. People will not be able to evade their obligations. The data will be there for all to see, and we will hold them to account.
Debbie Abrams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I also want to add my voice to those calling for an urgent reparations for least developed countries around climate justice. I think they've had a collective slap in the face in conjunction with the cuts in development funding. But can I ask the Prime Minister specifically on the new planning framework whether he will be ruling out developments in fossil fuels?
Prime Minister.
I can tell her that we want to move beyond coal. We'll have no more coal from 2024, and around the world we are no longer investing in fossil fuels.
Bima Falami.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst I was at COP in Glasgow, I definitely picked up some frustration from developing countries about the $100 billion of finance, climate finance, going to them. Could the Prime Minister outline how, over the next year, the UK is going to help set out and ensure how this money is going to reach developing countries, who's going to allocate it, and make sure we hold businesses and countries' feet to the fire to make sure that it happens?
Prime Minister.
We will make sure that we do indeed hold the developed world's feet to the fire. We got very close to the 100 billion. We'll get there by thereabouts by 2023, and frankly, that's much better than seemed possible earlier on in the negotiations.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister has dodged the issue about turning the City of London into the capital of green investment. And so the UK is 1% of global emissions, but the City of London's corporations and financial institutions represent 15% of global emissions. So where is his plan to ensure that they commit to 1.5 and zero emissions?
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy, the City of London is already the global centre of green investment, and its lead grows the whole time.
Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I ask the Prime Minister to join me in thanking the PPS for the President of COP26. There could have been no better backbench champion to gently corral and encourage all of us to fight for the environmental issues that the member holds so dear. So may I thank her, and will the Prime Minister join me in thanking her? And will the Prime Minister give further information about the is it 210 million for small nuclear technology? If we had left it to the members opposite, we would have no nuclear technology or nuclear capacity to speak of. So could you update us on what are the plans for small nuclear technology?
I thank my honourable friend, and she's absolutely right. I want to pay tribute to the brilliant PPS of the President of COP, and to confirm that we're putting another 200 million into supporting small modular reactors, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Nadia Whittle.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UK's leadership
of COP26 was undermined by climate hypocrisy at home, but we still have the COP presidency, and a change of policy now could still influence others. So in that spirit, will the government stop drilling in the Cambo oil field, scrap plans for a new coal mine in Cumbria, and cancel cuts in taxes on domestic flights? Yes or no?
Prime Minister.
Yeah, Madam Deputy Speaker, this country has already shown unbelievable leadership in powering beyond coal, and the countries of the world can see that.
Martin Vickers.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As my right honourable friend is aware, Northern Lincolnshire and the Humber region are major centres for our renewable energy sector and can play a major part in spearheading achieving the COP26 targets. Could my right honourable friend reaffirm government support for developing the industry, not just in Northern Lincolnshire but elsewhere, which will have the added benefit of levelling up many of our industrial areas?
Yes. I congratulate my honourable friend on what he's doing to support low-carbon industries across the North East, and it has immense potential throughout the country. He's quite right.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I noticed in the Prime Minister's statement he mentioned Aristotle. So could he explain how breaking his own manifesto promise to the poorest people in the world, those worst affected by climate change, could possibly be consistent with the actions of the virtuous person?
Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have not, and what we are doing is continue. No, and they must really retract this, Madam Deputy Speaker, because what we're doing is not only committing 11.6 billion, which I announced, which was a doubling of the previous commitment, but we are adding as soon as we can, as soon as the numbers will allow us, another £1 billion to £12.6 billion. That is one of the biggest commitments to tackling climate change around the world of any country in the world, and she should be proud of it.
Dr. Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I congratulate the Prime Minister and the COP President on the incredible achievements at the COP Summit. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it's science, technology, research and development that's going to get us through this mess? But this is going to need a huge workforce skilled in STEM. And so could you update the House on the work the government's doing to improve and enhance careers and training in STEM, but also breaking down barriers for women and people in marginalised backgrounds taking on those careers?
He's making a very important point, and we've not only got to train more people up in STEM, and we're investing hugely in skills, but we've got to make sure that people with existing skills in hydrocarbon-intensive means of propulsion are trained to work with EVs and other low-carbon technologies, and that's what we're doing as well.
Liz Savile-Roberts.
We know the COP26 agreement is the bare minimum in terms of what needs to be done to tackle the climate emergency already claiming lives around the world. Wales joined last week as a core member of the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance. At the same time, news came that the Conservative Party under this Prime Minister has pocketed £1.5 million in donations from oil and gas interests. He can redeem his reputation by joining Wales, France, Denmark and others as a core member of the Beyond Oil and Gas Alliance. Will he?
Prime Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady. We are going beyond hydrocarbons faster than virtually any other country in the world, and she should be proud of that.
Matt Rodder.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Could I pay tribute to the COP President for his work? Will the Prime Minister now indicate how he is going to put pressure on the major coal producers and importers, and indeed how he will use UK trade policy to achieve this?
Prime Minister.
We will hold all coal producers, importers, mining countries around the world to their commitment to reduce our global dependence on coal. They've made them in black and white in the Glasgow Climate Pact, and we will hold them to account.
Catherine McKinnell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm sorry to cast a shadow on the mutual backslapping here today, because there has been widespread concern that the Prime Minister simply lacked the leadership we needed to see, given he had the presidency of COP26
and the presidency of the G7 chair. And doesn't he recognise, as a country that now routinely threatens to renege on its international commitments, and it has cut international aid, what it is putting back does not make up for the cut, one of the only G7 countries to do so, that he simply lacks the credibility and the trust that we currently need to lead on this issue, and he needs to sort that out.
Madam Deputy Speaker, they've had a very tough job, the opposition this afternoon, because they've tried time and time again to congratulate the UK government for achieving a success at COP26, while simultaneously attacking the UK government for whatever failings they... I think they should stick with their initial script.
Helen Hayes.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was pleased to attend part of COP26 as a member of the Environmental Audit Select Committee, and it was a particular privilege to meet with members of the Ugandan delegation who took part in an event that we hosted. I have to say, the Prime Minister's statement is completely tone-deaf in the face of the frustration and desperation of countries of the Global South at the failure of this COP to deliver on the 12-year-old promise of $100 billion a year for climate finance. Will he accept that his decision to persist with indefensible cuts to UK aid effectively tied the hands of his own negotiating committee on this vital issue?
She's talking total rubbish. We doubled. No, they don't know what they're talking about. They literally don't know what they're doing. We doubled climate finance for developing countries, and the reason that the vulnerable countries accepted the deal finally was because we have got a commitment to $100 billion. Yes, I'd have liked it faster, but it's there in black and white. Maybe she hasn't read it.
Karen Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Bristol is the first local authority in the country to declare a climate and ecological emergency. We've set out a citywide strategy to make Bristol carbon neutral, climate resilient and wildlife rich by 2030, the nuts and bolts, if you like. What Bristol needs, though, is the investment along with other cities, but the government's funding model currently makes us compete with other cities. The UK government can't reach its targets using that funding model, so will the government relook at that and help us with the private investment we need to make the massive contribution to the government's own national targets?
Prime Minister.
I thank Bristol for what they're doing. We're committed to regional plans for net zero. It should be able to. It should be possible within the funding envelope that Bristol has, but we'll certainly look at it.
Vera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Department for Energy and Climate Change under the Lib Dem leadership until 2015 was a huge driver towards decarbonisation across the board, and there are now renewed calls to bring back such a department. However, there seem to be sources in the Treasury who are against a move like that, saying it would become the biggest begging bowl in Whitehall apart from the NHS. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that we should bring back a Department for Energy and Climate Change, or does he agree with the Treasury?
She's totally wrong, Madam Deputy Speaker, because what you need is to integrate business into the fight against climate change, and that is the way to do it, as we've done with wind power, and what you also need is nuclear power.
Absolutely.
Rupa Huq.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government says it's now following the science. It said it during COVID and it's saying it on climate, but they've managed to alienate the entire scientific community of this nation over the weekend with leaked press reports that the UK is about to be wrenched out of 3 different international multi-billion research and infrastructure projects that tackle exactly these 2 things because they're backed by the EU scientific budget. Can he confirm that we need a joined-up approach on these things? It's not about settling old scores. And can he tell us that these reports are truly media tittle-tattle?
Prime Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy, I don't know quite what relevance it has to COP, but I will say that the UK is investing massively. We doubled our commitments to R&D. We're going up to £22 billion in funding for science, and we've set up a new ARIA, Advanced Research Investigations Agency, which on the model of the US DARPA, which is unlike anything any previous government has done.
Could everyone who has a long question written out or typed out just edit it to half what it has? We must have much shorter questions, and the problem is when people read their questions, they're great big long questions, and actually Erskine May makes it very clear that questions should never be read. Olivia Blake.
Thank
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, at COP26, the Prime Minister said that we were at 1 minute to midnight. I'm afraid I think his clock might be a bit slow, and the action that has been set out is not enough. As Aristotle said, is hope a waking dream? Because I would really like to hear from the Prime Minister that he is going to stop Cambo and is going to halt the Cumbria coal mine.
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy, the reason we've been able to get the very considerable success at COP is because the whole world can see that we're moving beyond coal, and they can see the pace at which we've done it.
Daniel Zeichner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The review commissioned by the Treasury, carried out by Professor Dasgupta of the University of Cambridge, highlighted the importance of nature-based solutions to tackle environmental challenges. Can the Prime Minister tell us what was done at COP26 by the UK government to pursue those conclusions, and will they be pursued at the COP15 biodiversity talks?
Prime Minister.
So I'm grateful to him and indeed to Professor Dasgupta. What we have at COP26 is an immense agreement on forests, which are vital habitats for untold manner of wildlife, but also a negotiation now that will continue with our Chinese friends, our Chinese partners through till their Kunming Biodiversity Summit. And what COP26 achieved was an integration of climate science, high climate science, with nature, and that's the first time it's happened.
Jonathan Edwards.
Madam Deputy Speaker, a potential barrier to the accelerated move towards 100% zero-emission vehicles he mentioned in his statement is grid capacity, particularly in rural areas such as Carmarthenshire. What is the British Government doing to ensure that the grid will be resilient enough to meet expected demand?
Prime Minister.
I thank him. One of the most important things is to ensure that we have enough baseload electricity, and that's why we're investing in nuclear as well.
Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In order to meet our commitments around net zero, the Humber Energy Estuary will play a vital role. So I am at a bit of a loss to understand in all the briefings over the weekend about the integrated rail review that we in the Humber will get nothing in terms of a greener, faster connectivity. No coast-to-coast Northern Powerhouse rail, despite what the Prime Minister has promised in the past, and no benefit from HS2 to the east of Leeds. So, Prime Minister, I just wondered if you could comment on the fact that the Humber is not getting much COP.
The Honourable Lady mustn't say so, Prime Minister. She must ask if the Honourable Gentleman, Right Honourable Gentleman, Prime Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady. I want to congratulate Humber, the region, and what they're doing in green technology, carbon capture and storage, and we will ensure that this country builds on their lead with clean green technology around the whole country.
Stephen Flynn.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the run-up to COP, the Prime Minister spoke about Kermit the Frog. Of course, on the first day of COP, he then spoke about cows belching before disappearing up a closey for the next 2 weeks, instead focusing on his time on trying to cover up Conservative Party corruption. So can I ask the Prime Minister, when the world needed climate leadership, does he believe that he was a help or a hindrance?
Prime Minister.
Listen, I think that the opposition, as I say, have struggled all afternoon but with the appalling fact that COP26 has been a success, and I think they, in all humility, should recognise that. They should congratulate the negotiators. They should thank all the countries of the UN that came together to do something very difficult and very remarkable. And I'm grateful to all the participants.
Ella McMorrin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've been at many COPs, and each one agrees more ambition, but we are yet to see the action that is needed. The world is currently on track for 2.4 degrees, a death sentence for millions, devastation for the planet. So how can we believe this Prime Minister to take the action needed when this government continues to use loopholes to fund fossil fuel projects overseas, locking communities into that fossil fuel era for decades?
Prime Minister.
I can't believe she's actually been at that many COPs, Madam Deputy Speaker, because no previous COP has agreed anything about coal or about cars or about trees or anything like the commitments that we made, the solid granular commitments that the countries of the world made, including no new support for overseas coal-fired power stations, and they did it because this government is leading the way in cutting support for hydrocarbons overseas, and they could see it plain as a pikestaff.
Alison Tulis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Glasgow is a proud host of COP, and I would like to thank my constituents, Glasgow businesses and the COP volunteers who made the world so welcome. And to all our new friends, Scotland says, haste you back. Could I ask the Prime Minister if he will act to support and incentivise the investment in innovative start-ups like Catrick Technologies in my constituency, who are growing and developing world-leading green energy technology in Glasgow?
I thank her, and I have seen some wonderful new technologies being developed by people, by businesses in Glasgow, where it's useful, appropriate for us to give support. We will.
Alex Sobel.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was at COP representing the Interparliamentary Union as the global co-rapporteur for COP26. The Global Parliament's delivered a very strong document, and while I was there I met the Speaker of the Tuvalu Parliament, Samuelu Tio, and he told me that donor countries had provided enough finance for them to build a seawall, but consultants from those donor countries could not agree how to build the seawall. This is one of the real difficult issues that we promise we cannot deliver. Will we deliver the adaptation measures that small and developing states need so they don't go under the ocean?
He makes an excellent point. The next Egyptian presidency of COP will focus on adaptation measures and what we all need to do to support.
Karen Buck.
Speaker. The Glasgow Climate Pact included a request that countries return next year with stronger targets for 2030. Yet within hours, the Australian government had issued a statement saying that they were not intending to strengthen their target. What will the government do over the remainder of the COP presidency to ensure that countries like Australia that do not meet their NDC commitments are encouraged to raise their standards and make sure that they deliver for the world?
Prime Minister.
Australia did make a commitment to net zero, and electorates around the world, the consumers around the world are now going to hold governments to account for the promises that they've made.
Janet Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When we consider energy efficiency, the UK is some of the draftiest homes in Europe. A national retrofit programme would not only drive down emissions, but would also create thousands of jobs for people around our countries and save families £400 off their annual energy bills. So can the Prime Minister tell us why he scrapped his Green Homes grant?
Prime Minister.
I thank her, and this is something that we're committed to doing, to retrofitting homes around the whole of the UK. The housing stock, as I said earlier this afternoon, is very various. You need different approaches in different places. But what we're doing is supporting households across the country to go green and thereby to save on their fuel bills as well. And that's the approach of the government.
And finally, Stephen Farry.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Rather than self-congratulations today, surely the time to judge the historical significance of the Glasgow COP will be in 2050. And given that climate change is a truly global issue, does the Prime Minister recognise that one of the impacts of climate change is going to be more migration of peoples around the world, and also more conflict, sadly, in many places around the world? So in that context, surely the UK should be doing more to lead on international aid and also to have a more progressive asylum policy at home.
Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I think the whole House would agree 2050 is frankly far too late. And that's why we're making the commitments that we've made now. And the way to avert crisis in the next decades is to make the changes that we're making now. And on his point about climate finance, I simply repeat what I've said earlier on. I really think that members opposite should look at what the UK is spending. It sets an example and a benchmark for the rest of the world to follow.
Thank you. I appreciate that, that this statement has taken a long time, but it is a historic matter and everyone had their chance to speak. Thank you, Prime Minister. Point of order, Dame Diana Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I speak further to my point of order last Tuesday, the 9th of November, in which I sought assurances that the long-awaited integrated rail plan, the centrepiece of the government's so-called levelling up agenda, would not be leaked to the media while the House was in recess. All or most of the contents of the integrated rail plan have now been reported in the press over the weekend, and yet again, before any statement to this House, we've had selective leaking to the media ahead of the plan's launch, which government sources say is not until Thursday. This is despite previous statements from Mr Speaker telling ministers on numerous occasions, most recently over the recent budget statement, to end this repeated and systematic abuse of the House. The Department of Transport now say they do not comment on speculation, but their advanced briefings set the speculation running. What further action can Mr Speaker take to address the way the House has been treated? And isn't waiting until Thursday for this House to hear about the rail plan now just a charade? Could I ask if the Secretary of State for Transport will now be summoned to this House to make his statement on his wholly or mostly leaked rail plan without further delay and before Thursday?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her point of order and for having given Mr Speaker notice that she intended to make this point of order. I have to say, yet again, to repeat what Mr Speaker has said many, many times, and I venture to say too many times recently in the House, that it is a basic point of good constitutional form that announcements about government policy should be made here in this chamber to this House of Commons, and that when the government has something of importance to announce, the people who should be asking the questions and holding the government to account are the elected representatives of the people, you, members of Parliament, not those in the television studios, the radio studios, Twitter, or the newspapers. And so I have no hesitation in reiterating Mr. Speaker's often and very forcefully made point that ministers who make announcements other than in this chamber should consider very carefully whether they are adhering to the ministerial code. I thank the Honourable Lady for bringing her matter to the House. As to her simple question about summoning the Secretary of State, I think she will know that if she consults the clerks, there will be ways, but the Honourable Lady is well experienced in these matters. There are ways in which she can endeavour to summon a Secretary of State here to this chamber, and I'm sure that Mr. Speaker will listen to her plea. Thank you. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Social Security Uprating of Benefits Bill. Consideration of Lord's amendments.
Now, I must draw the House's attention to the fact that financial privilege is engaged by both the Lord's amendments. If the House agrees to either of these Lord's amendments, I shall ensure that the appropriate entry is made in the journal. We begin with the Government's motion to disagree with Lord's Amendment 1, with which it will be convenient to consider Lord's Amendment 2. I call the Minister, Guy Opperman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Social Security Uprating of Benefits Bill is a one-year bill by reason of the pandemic. Madam Deputy Speaker, last year, as you will be aware, we changed the law for 1 year to increase state pensions by 2.5%, when average earnings had fallen and consumer price inflation increased by 0.5 percentage point. If we had not taken this action, state pensions would have been frozen. This year, average earnings growth is estimated to be unusually high, distorted by the cumulative effects of the natural economic reactions to the coronavirus pandemic and the response to the supportive measures introduced by the government to protect livelihoods. The figures for average weekly earnings from May to July, the measure used for uprating earnings-linked benefits, has grown at 8.3%, which is over 2 percentage points higher than at any time over the last 2 decades. Recognising this COVID-related distortion, the government is setting aside the earnings link for 1 more year, 2022 to 2023, and continuing the double lock of at least inflation or 2.5%. The triple lock will be applied again in the usual way for the basic and new state pensions from the following year. I will give way, yes, of course.
For giving way, and of course I understand why the government has decided not to increase the state pension by 8%, but can you tell the House, is it still the government's intention that the value of the state pension should, over time, at least keep track with earnings?